Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kiani, the interior concept designer from modulyss. Welcome to another modulyss talk session. This is a platform where we aim to inform and inspire professionals by sharing trends and insights from experts across the industry. Today's webinar will be focused on the future of workspaces and how technology is shaping the why we design and how we experience them. We'll explore topics such as the influence of digital tools on spaces and the role of soft flooring in creating more adaptive and human-centered work environments. I'm very happy to introduce today's expert speaker, Arwa Chaklasi. Arwa has over 15 years of experience working on high-end commercial and hospitality projects. Before we begin, just a quick note, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to write them in the Q&A chat and we'll try to address some of them at the end of the presentation. Now I give my spotlight to Arwa.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you, Kiani. As she mentioned, I'm here today to talk about what are hybrid workplaces and the role technology plays in designing them. Thank you, everyone, for your time. As a brief introduction, we are going to just go through the different key factors that play a very important role in topic. And just to explain this topic further, we'll end with a conclusion, the key design principles we learn. And then finally, we'll open the floor for questions and answers. So as an introduction, after COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a substantial shift from a traditional office space to more of a hybrid workplace. And it has changed the way offices work and function. And the hierarchy-based environments have actually changed into more flexible hubs and more focused on collaboration, connection, and innovation. In this, technology now plays a very important factor as well. It actually shapes the way workplace design functions through digital integration and different smart systems that actually influence the way rooms are designed, how people move through the office, and how spaces can actually adapt to support both remote and in-person work. Some key factors which we'll be discussing today will be new spatial logic, connections, technology, of course, the new spatial typologies that have emerged from the shift from a traditional office to a hybrid workplace, designing for equal presence. What this means is designing for both people in the office as well as those remotely logging in, flexibility, of course, and the most important of all is human well-being. So we start with why hybrid work actually needs a new spatial logic. So hybrid work has actually changed why people come to the office. People no longer come into the office just to simply sit on a desk. Focus work can actually happen anywhere. A sort of common pattern that we actually see is that employees choose to come into the office the days which they specifically need for any collaborative work. For example, maybe a team workshop, maybe it's an onboarding, maybe it's a project kickoff, activities that actually benefit from being in a shared space. Technology then, of course, helps reshape the spatial demand and behavior. Calendar and collaboration tools often dictate the peak office days. For example, teams, when they schedule hybrid meetings midweek, buildings experience uneven occupancy, and this sort of challenges the traditional space planning, which was done based on just daily averages and set rules. Next, it's about changing from a place of work, the mentality or the thought process from a change of place of work to actually a place of connection. You could see here a basic graphical diagram of how a traditional office looked versus a hybrid office nowadays. Focus work generally ends up being distributed and collaboration actually becomes quite spatial. Many organizations actually report that employees end up doing the deep, concentrated work that they need to do at home, and they actually just come into the office for brainstorming and alignment sessions. And this sort of shifts the space demand towards collaborative environments rather than rows and rows of desks. As you can see on the image on the left, the traditional, you've got the cafe, you've got the office area, which is just rows of workstations, while on the right, you have a more flexible, integrated workplace where you have a lot of different functions sort of happening in different spaces. And this sort of brings the identity of something what we call an activity-based workplace, where the workplace is actually designed based on the various activities that the people or the employees would be actually using the space for rather than just the traditional setup. The office then, of course, also supports culture, trust, and learning. new hires always say that they actually learn a lot more from informal conversations and observations in person in the office than a scheduled virtual meeting, something which I have experienced recently as well in the current times, since I'm in Dubai at the moment. And it sort of reinforces the office's role in cultural transmission. Because one of the important topics we're talking about now is how technology plays a very important role in this aspect. Digital tools actually define how a space is used and sized. Video conferencing, cloud platforms, and other apps actually change the way rooms are sized, the layouts, and the quantities. For example, nowadays you see a lot of fewer desks, but more collaboration and hybrid meeting rooms. What are hybrid meeting rooms? Hybrid meeting rooms actually require different room proportions and different layouts. For example, a space designed for video calls often seats fewer people, but actually what's important is good lighting, acoustics, camera placement, and it sort of changes the traditional meeting room standards and setups, which you can see in the image on the left. It's a regular meeting room, but the placement of the video conferencing facility, the sound bar, the mounting heights, all has to be coordinated with the location of the desk, the number of people within the space as well. And like we said before, technology actually helps organize the space, not just support it. Some offices, as an example, nowadays cluster a lot of hybrid meeting rooms near collaboration zones because the belief is that once people enter an office, meetings can take place spontaneously. You don't really need to go book a meeting room. And it's sort of, there's something which we say a meeting, that pre-meeting that takes place before actually going into the meeting room as well, which you can see an example over here of a traditional meeting room setup, but with the movable partitions, the image on the right. So that sort of has the opportunity to close the space off, but also open it and expand it to more people who are on the outside as well. These factors, in essence, have created new spatial typologies, which is different types of spaces that can be created within an office environment. We see fewer assigned desks nowadays, more variety, collaboration hub, focus rooms, breakout spaces, touchdown spaces. A lot of these terminologies are used of late. And instead of having, for example, having one large meeting room, organizations generally create now multiple medium-sized rooms that can actually run parallel meetings with remote participants, but also you can combine a couple of them, change the furniture arrangement, and open it up as well. So you're actually efficiently using the space that you have. The image at the left, for example, shows a collaboration zone on a corner of the building. These corners of the building floor plan sometimes are the most trickiest places to design because you can't really have workstations over there. This is a good place to have this sort of casual lounge furniture seating, the movable TV screens as well, that if you want to have a quick meeting as well, you can just drag it in, present something, have a conversation as well. The image on the right shows a traditional meeting room, but it has the movable partitions. So you are giving the opportunity to use that space as a multi-purpose space. You open it up, it goes into a larger space. You can move the furniture around as well. Next, you're just running through different space typologies. So these are some examples from projects which I've worked on in my previous firms. First image is something what we call a focus room. Now, what is a focus room? Focus rooms are smaller one packs, two packs rooms, around 6 to 8 square meters. The intent of these places are for someone to come, maybe be there for maybe 30 minutes, max 1 hour, use the space, maybe if it's a two-person, maybe have a quick private chat with a colleague, maybe get on a call, use it for a couple of hours and then walk out. You could actually have it as a desk setup. You could have it as an armchair lounge setup as well with a laptop table. There are many different furniture arrangements that can happen within the same space. Touchdown spaces, again, there are numerous types that are allowed. For this particular example in this pharmaceutical firm was between the work desks, we're allowed for where the columns were, we use that space. Again, these are some of the inefficient spaces which are difficult to design, but you can actually utilize that space quite well by creating a nice high table touchdown space with bar stools, with power provisions where someone can come with a laptop, have a quick chat with a colleague who's sitting at the other end of the office, or, just catch up with your manager and then, move back to the other places you want to work from. Hybrid meeting rooms, I've mentioned this previously as well. This is more of a flexible space where it has a variety of different furniture arrangements. In this particular image as well, you can see you've got the high table over here with the high task chairs as well with the AV configuration to have a quick catch-up meeting, or you can have just armchairs to have a casual conversation with a colleague. Collaboration zones, again, the same concept, different variety of seating, different arrangements, flexible, movable, grab a coffee, have a quick conversation. And shared desking, also something which is also called hot desking. So as companies move to hybrid work, the requirement for having a 1:1 ratio of workstations is no longer required. This substantially reduces the number of desks required in the office space and instead creates something called hot desks, which this is one particular example of these booths wherein there are a lot of apps nowadays called iDesk, etc., which before entering the office, you can actually, if I know I'm going to come into the office Monday from 2 to 4 p.m., I can actually just book which desk I want in advance, lock it off for myself, work from there for those couple of hours, and then move on to either one of the other spaces in the office or go back home and continue working. Next, I think what is important is designing for equal presence. Hybrid spaces must support both remote and in-person users equally. I think this is very important. I believe we've all been in situations where remote participants struggle to speak up sometimes, where they're on a single screen in a large meeting room at one end, and the space acoustics are not designed accurately, where there's a lot of multiple conversations happening with the people within the room, and that's not captured by the microphones or the speakers. And then there's a lot of chaos, in short, basically, which makes the remote participant feel inferior, or they just don't feel like they're part of that meeting, and a lot of conversation gets lost in this aspect. That's why spatial layouts it's very important to design them correctly because they directly affect the participation and power. Camera placements, seating geometry, acoustics, very important, lighting also very important, all influence the presence. And if it's a poor design, they basically have two categories of participants. The first class ones and the second class are the ones who are, remote on that one single screen. How can this be changed? There are a variety of ways these can be done. One particular example is previously you would have large boardrooms with one large desk with a screen at one end. What we see is in such rooms which increase above a certain length, couple of meters, you actually have screens on both sides. That's one way of doing it. Or you make this arrangement of the seating more circular or curved, so there's a balance interaction as well. Ceiling mounted speakers, ceiling mounted microphones as well, which sort of capture the sound. And technology is advanced so much that now you can actually control if a particular speaker is speaking, they will only capture that sound and not carry the background white noise as well, which helps the people online to be able to understand the conversation that's actually taking place from the speaker itself, not the other chatter around. So what I'm just showing you here is a couple of examples of how this generally works. So in a design process, you work collaborative with various consultants. You've got your AV consultants, you've got your lighting consultants, acoustic consultants, MEP consultants, and of course the interior designer as well. A couple of images on the left are some simulations that are done on a project where in the schematic stage and the detailed design stage, where step number one, what the AV consultant would do is have a conversation with the client and understand what are the case study, what are the case types, how would the client want that particular space to be used? Understanding that is very important because that will define what tech they need to allow within the space. For example, if the client comes back and says they just want to use the meeting room for in-person meetings, they're not expecting to present anything, then the tech would be very different. But if they're saying that they heavily use the space for a lot of video conferencing, with one person or two people being in person, but majority of the people being online, then that needs to be allowed for. You can just see a couple of simulations done wherein this is a 6-pack meeting room, 12-pack meeting room, all the tech that actually goes into the room to make sure it actually functions correctly. This includes the occupancy sensors at the entrance on the ceiling. Then in the larger rooms, because the space is quite deep, you'll have ceiling mounted speakers, ceiling mounted microphones as well sometimes, or deck microphones on individually for each of the person. Again, there are many setups that can be done. It all depends on the client's requirements. Bring your own device, wireless dongles as well, so that the connectivity is seamless. You just go and connect your laptop to that and it directly projects the information on the screen. Sound bars, camera placements, all of this is very deeply coordinated and the locations are all coordinated with aspect to the furniture. So no consultant works in isolation. It is a total complete team effort where everyone coordinates each aspect. Mounting heights, for example, of the cameras and the sound bars, the TV screens as well are very crucial to the furniture. If it is seated height desk, the height would be would be different. But if it is a high desk or a standing desk, then you would have to coordinate that height to make sure that no views are blocked by any of the furniture or any tech. Same thing for the lighting as well. Once the stimulation, as shown in the left, is done by the AV consultants, what we do as interior designers is make sure that that requirement by them is very neatly integrated with the interior design. So yes, tech does does not look good most of the times, concealing, but then that's where the ID portion comes in to make sure that all the cabling, the wires are all neatly concealed, nicely coordinated so that the design from the outside looks clean and neat, but everything is as per the requirement. There's a lot of AV that gets concealed within cabinets as well in terms for maintenance, allowing for flexibility to open it, ventilation systems as well. All of this is very tightly coordinated during the design process. Next, we talk about flexibility and data-driven design. So hybrid works very absolutely requires adaptable and reconfigurable spaces because occupancy varies daily. Spaces must be able to shift quickly between different use cases through movable furniture, partitions, and wireless technology. Some offices have a habit of taking a large space, a collaboration space, and always wanting the ability to convert it into town halls or training areas simply by just moving a couple of furniture around, having variety of different tech models that no constructions required. Image on the left, for example, is a large open space with drop-down projector screens. The drop-down projector screens might just come into play when they're having a large town hall gathering, but in the days they don't need that. That can go up, and the space you can see here can be used in a variety of different setups as a dining space, meeting spaces, etc. Data also helps spaces evolve over time. Sensors and usage data actually show how spaces work and actually help understand the spaces better, and then the design does not really become iterative. Occupancy data always explains why some meeting rooms are actually used more than the others and why sometimes, say, focus rooms are always constantly overbooked. And this sort of helps the facilities team from the client to actually redesign and expand the place without doing a lot of reconstruction or refurbishment work into their office. Here are just some examples of how spaces can be adaptable. Again, these are some projects which I've done and worked on previously in Dubai. The first example, the row of first three images. The image on the left, if we start there, this is an open collaboration space between some workstations. You can see one setup over here where it's all open. There's a mobile Google board as well, which is not being used in this case because it's just a discussion that's taking place with a whiteboard where people are having in-person conversations. Another scenario, you can see over here, you've got the mobile curtain that if you pull that around, if you want to have a quick meeting or a semi-private chat, you can just close it off and separate the space from the remaining spaces and use it more privately. So it's the same space, but it actually gives you lots of different functions and makes the space so flexible. Another example below is the two images where in a meeting room space opens into a work cafe. And you can actually use both the spaces combined if you're having a large gathering, a town hall, or you want to just expand your work cafe into the meeting space as well in case you're hosting people. In the situation where you want to just use the meeting room, you just close off the movable partitions and both the areas are separated. And these movable partitions, of course, are acoustically treated to make sure that sound doesn't really carry from one space to the other. Another example of divisible rooms and how they can be multiple arrangements can be done. This is something which of late is becoming quite common because square meter area floor plate is always very limited, but clients require a lot of functions. They want a lot of meeting rooms, but we do not have the space allowance for it. So the most efficient way to do it is by doing divisible partitions. So for example, in this particular project, we had a requirement for the client when they wanted a gathering for around 150 people. We did not have the allowance of the space to allow for just one single room for that. So what we did is we combined it with three smaller rooms, gave the option of having divisible partitions, which when opened up in that particular scenario, you could use the entire space for that 150 plus requirement, which the client mentioned that they might host that kind of a gathering maybe once a couple of months. So it wouldn't be wise to create just a space that large just for an event that takes place once every couple of months. But here we've given them multiple functions of the space. They have the option of dividing it, having a lecture class setting as well, a training room setting with movable furniture, flexible furniture. Same for the situation on the left. You've got a lecture setting, you've got a classroom setting, you've got different options, functions that can take place both individually. You can use each room individually, you can combine two and use them together, or you can combine all three and use them all together, however you wish. And all these rooms always end up being bookable. So you can actually book it in advance and understand how you want to use the space for that particular day. And last, I think what's most important is human experience and well-being. Choice, comfort, and autonomy drives engagement. People engage more when they can choose where and how they can work. And this is something which has become very important over the past couple of years. So that's why hybrid workplaces must offer variety. Not a one-size-fits-all solution does not work anymore. And good design actually reduces digital and cognitive fatigue. So sometimes when people have back-to-back video calls, the acoustics poor, the lighting's poor, people really get exhausted, and that doesn't really help their efficiency in the office space. What we also see is this terminology, which is coming up quite late, is resi-mercial designs, which basically means creating spaces in the office which makes people feel that they're actually back home. So giving more softer finishes, carpet, giving softer floors, lighter finishes, giving them the feel that, not just the chairs and the desk, but maybe they want a high table, maybe they want some lounge, a sofa, etc. Many options, tiered seating, casual poofs sometimes as well with a laptop table. There are a lot of opportunities that we can do purely just by changing the furniture. Again, here are just some examples of various projects I've worked on of different space types. So the image on the left, if we start from the top, is actually a co-working space. So you can see it's got a nice large atrium with a lot of natural light coming in. You can see it up front itself. Biophilia also is very important. This is a communal table that's been allowed for people to interact, have conversations together. Some lounge seating is on the side as well. Tiered seating at the back, that if at any point they want to have a town hall or something, you have a nice amphitheater setup as well available. The image in the middle top is actually a cafe, which is also used as a work cafe. So it's an opportunity for people to come, have their lunch, grab a coffee, but also have some quick meetings. Nowadays, a lot of meetings takes place in such situations where you don't really need to book. If it's not a very confidential conversation, you don't really need to book a meeting room and block it. You can just get your client or your supplier contact over here, grab them a coffee, have a quick conversations, and then, just head back. Some intimate booth seating as well. Being inclusive is very important as well. There are a lot of neurodivergent individuals as well who sometimes do not like the very open plan space, but they need a bit more secluded private space as well. So that's where focus rooms, these kind of booth seatings also help provide that little bit sense of privacy as well when required. The bottom left is actually a meeting room, but again, not a traditional meeting room. It's got the AV setup, it's got the TV screen, the sound bar, all of it, but it's more of a what we call in this region a modulyss setup, a more casual lounge setup, but still you can have a nice meeting over there as well with the decorated pendant lights, so it's a bit more softer and intimate. Atrium spaces as well, which are generally previously just considered discarded and just public spaces, actually can be used very efficiently now. This is one particular example where the atrium space was used in the image on the bottom middle is actually used very efficiently. Biophilia was introduced. There was a cafe at one end, but there was a lot of desking and booth seatings integrated where, again, the same conversation. If you're in a tower, you don't really need to get your visitor all the way to your office on the 7th floor, for example. You can just come down, meet them there directly, grab a coffee, have your quick conversation, and then head back out. Another example is actually example from modulyss, where different carpet arrangements as well can really soften and lighten the space and make the employees feel a bit more at comfort and ease when they're within the space. So in conclusion, basically, what is the key design principles that we can take out of this discussion? And for me, I think what I consider most important is that you need to design for connection, equity, and adaptability. I think these three principles are consistently emerging across successful hybrid workplaces and should guide the decision making. And technology should actually inform spaces, not dominate it. So technology should be able to enable better human interaction, not overwhelm or dictate the design. I think that's very important. So the most effective workplaces, according to me, are designed around what people actually do and actually want rather than just using outdated data. And that way, technology can actually shape the space and the people within actually give it the meaning. So Thank you so much, everyone. I hope this was informative. And if anyone has any questions, I'm sure we can get into that now. So appreciate your
Thank you.
attention.
Thank you, Arwa, for that insightful presentation. I think it's really interesting to see how digitalization shape our workspace, but also how the work culture has changed over the years. Like you said, with COVID, it accelerated, and it's really noticeable for me as well to see the changes over the years, and also the demand for flexibility and hybrid solutions. I think that's the future. You cannot have one space for one particular activity anymore, and it was really interesting. We have prepared some questions to dive a little bit deeper on the topic as well. So, in your experience, how do smart building systems actually change the way people use space on a day-to-day basis?
Um, I think what's important is smart buildings actually help people to stop managing the space. So when systems are completely integrated and tied into sensors and automation, users no longer have to manually adjust. And I think that's quite liberating for people as well, because sometimes people don't really understand what needs to be done where. They no longer need to adjust the lighting or the temperature or the blinds. Nowadays, with occupancy sensors, lights are integrated with the BMS. Light just follows the occupancy. If someone's in the room, it's light, it goes on. If not, it switches off. HVAC as well can be adapted to real-time usage. Different times of the day, it can all be integrated where, at certain times when, the sun's coming in a certain direction, the temperature can be adapted, so on and so forth, based on the weather as well. Same thing nowadays, meeting rooms are all, with the Condeco, with all the integrated systems, you can all prep themselves. So beforehand, the systems can be put in where you have different scene settings, where if it's a video conferencing meeting, the meeting room adjusts itself according to the lighting, all of it, the blinds go down, all of the setups are just done by a click of a button. And I think this makes people feel more liberated, and they become active controllers of the space. Actually, they become passive controllers rather than, active controllers of the space.
Yeah, makes sense. How can designers balance data-driven decision making with intuition and human-centered design?
Okay, that's good. So data, I believe, is excellent in answering what is happening, but I don't think it's reached a point where it can actually explain why it's happening. And I think that's where intuition and empathy and human interactions come into play. For example, occupancy data might show that a particular lounge is being underused, but it's only through human observation, conversations, in-person interactions, you may get to know that why that the reason it's not being used is because the location is very awkward. It's right in front of the lift lobby and between the toilets, for example, and people don't like using that space because they feel too awkward or too exposed. So this kind of information cannot be provided by data. It only happens through the human connection and the
Yeah.
lived-in experience, being there in person.
So the first step is gather the data and then see
Yes,
why, the big
talk. I
why.
think
Yeah.
empathy, intuition, that's the human connection is all.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that can actually let you know why is it happening and how to fix it as well.
Yeah. I have an interesting question from the audience as well. What's the impact of AI in the workplace so far, and what's foreseen for the future? Do you have any insight on that?
I'm I'm on the edge with that. I'm still old school, but I think the answer is very similar to what's before, because AI collects a lot of data and puts it together, but I think it's more generic. Adapting it and making sure that is actually working for your region, where you stay, the demographics affect the decisions a lot. So I'm sure, I think it's very similar for me personally, that you can read it, you can get the information, but whether it actually works for you, you need to adapt it to your specific requirement. That still needs to be done with the human touch. So I'll
Yeah.
still be hopeful.
That's good. Let's see. One more question. In a technology driven workplace, how do you ensure that the human experience remains central? So, you talked about having the human
Yes.
inputs to see where the data comes from. But
Mm.
other than that, do you have like another way of making sure the human stays center in the workplace?
I think it again comes down to the same thing, that you design for the emotional as well as functional needs. So tech is in place, and the best tech actually works when it just fades into, and it's just so seamless that it's just integrated. So you don't really see it, but it's there. But I think making sure the ancillary factors around, natural light, materiality, acoustics, privacy zones, what people understanding what people actually feel and how they want to use a space and not just how they perform actually is very important as well. So you need to make sure that you're creating all the spaces and making sure that people are comfortable when they're within, which actually will enhance the human experience.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question. I said it was the last, but I think it's also a really interesting question. Based on your experience in the MENA region, are there particular workplace trends emerging there that the rest of the world should pay attention to?
So being based in Dubai, Dubai has one
Yeah.
of, I'm not sure if one of the largest, but I was doing a bit of research when I was doing, came with this webinar, but I realized that there are around 200 nationalities. So we have a very, very diverse workplace culture, diverse nationalities. So when you're saying 200 plus, people come from different cultures, people come from different work styles. The understanding and expectation of what hierarchy, privacy, and collaboration means differs for people from different regions, you know. So I think what's very common over here, which is actually happening, and is what we call inclusive design. And this is just not for the demographic point of view, but like I mentioned, you know, just being sensitive and understanding individuals as well, being neuro inclusive as well, making sure, again, tying back to the conversation we had, making sure places are flexible, making sure you have, you know, open plan is something becoming very common, open spaces, but also making sure that that does not generally work for all individuals. Some people need to have a bit more private space, you know, that's why the focused rooms, these pods come into play as well. So being flexible, being open, making sure you're catering to all the diverse communities and individuals is very important. And that's why it's no longer one size fits all. You're not really taking a module and just cut, copy, pasting it here. You have to adapt to the region and to the people you work with.
Yeah. Makes sense as well.
Adaptability, I
Arwa,
think, is
oh,
important.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no worries.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. I'd like to also briefly mention our next and final webinar, which will feature Tim Hedden. He will walk us through a case study from Arab, so it's also really interesting. But before you leave, we would really appreciate if you could fill in the evaluation form, you guys, which you can access from the QR code on the screen. I will share my screen. Normally it should be visible. If you guys could scan this QR code, fill in the evaluation form, this helps us cater next sessions as well, and it helps us a lot. So thank you for joining us today, guys. You will get the Q&A and also a recording of this session through email as well. So if you, in case you missed it or whatever, you can still have a possibility to rewatch if necessary. But thank you so much, Arwa. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope to see you at the next modulyss Talk session.
Thank you, everyone.